Hi, I'm Heidi Leuszler, and I am very privileged to be here with you today, and thank you for joining us. So I'm here today as the head chef and owner of Berries and Flour. It's bakery and harvest goods. And one of our missions is to use more perennial crops and locally grown foods from our community in different types of baked goods and jam and tea and shrubs and all kinds of things. So, working with that mission has been the foundation of the bakery for me. And then being able to educate people on how to use these different crops in different foods is also part of our mission. So I'm really excited to be here today. So there are lots of different plums. Today we're going to use more of a plum that's in the grocery store. So these are a little bit bigger, very sweet, but they're delicious. So any of these products that we're going to make, a plum torte, which is a type of cake, and a plum jam, those can use any of these different plums. So you can swap as you want to. Mostly you'll be thinking about the volume that you're using or just the mass of fruit that you'll be working with. So I'm going to start with the plum torte, and then while that's baking, we'll do plum jam. Both of these are fairly quick things to do. So I hope that you can do these things in your own kitchens, in your own homes when you get the opportunity to do that. So we're going to use a little bit of prep, do a little bit of prep first. The first thing we're going to do is look at our pans for our torte. So the recipe is a traditional Italian torte. And what that usually requires is something called a springform pan. So this is a type of pan that has a catch on it. Whoops. And the bottom comes out, obviously. And you'll want to grease the sides of this and the bottom if you have it. These are really nice because when the torte is done, you can just pop the top off and you'll have a plate for your cake. If you don't have these at home, which is not all that common, you can just use a regular pan. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to show you a couple hacks that you can use to kind of make this into a makeshift springform pan for yourself. The first thing you'll want to do is either butter the pan. You can use butter, you can use shortening. And my favorite way to do that is to take a paper towel and then dip it in the shortening or the butter and just rub a very thin layer of the butter around the whole pan. Make sure you get in the crevices of the pan so that nothing sticks in there. Sticking in the pan is probably the worst thing for cakes. It'll still taste good, but it'll tear and won't be such a good presentation. Another thing that I've learned to use, a quick hack for the bakery, are these baking sprays that have flour in them. So you'll have a regular baking spray, but that is just an oil and it won't really stick to your pan. So you'll want to have the flour one. When you use this, you'll want to shake it really well to get the flour distributed in the oil. And then you'll just spray a thin layer on the pan. And maybe you can see that it leaves more of an opaque coating. And again, you'll want to get nice in the crevices. I also usually do this over the sink so I don't spray oil all over the house. So I'm going to turn around and do this over the sink. But again, you'll want a nice thick coating. So the other thing about tortes is that they are pretty sticky. Any kind of cake that I make with a sticky fruit bottom, so like an upside down cake, pineapple upside down cake, blueberry upside down cake, plum upside down cake, apricot upside down cake, I'll first put a piece of parchment in the bottom, and that helps the cake to be able to lift out of this pan. I think that's really important if you don't have a springform pan. So the best way to do that is to get a roll of parchment for yourself. If you don't have that today, that will be fine. And then I pulled a piece out so it wasn't so noisy. And you just put your pan down on the parchment and you'll just trace it with a pencil. Then you'll have a circle that's the size of your pan, and you'll want to use scissors and just cut on the inside of the circle so that you don't get the pencil in your cake. And then the circle is smaller than the pan on the outside, so it'll fit in the inside. So I already cut this for us just to go quicker. And I'm just going to put that right on the inside of my pan, and it will just cover the bottom. So this will allow it to just lift right out of the pan, and then the parchment can peel off the bottom. So again, I use this for any kind of upside down cake or anything that's just a thin layer of a thicker, dense cake. That will help it to get right out. So if you were using butter to line your cake pan, now what you're going to want to do is take a little bit of flour, maybe a tablespoon, and you'll put that in your cake pan, and then you're going to tap it like this and roll the flour all over the butter. You really want that flour to stick to the butter, so then that provides a layer that doesn't adhere to the pan at all. What I do when I'm using the flour is I tap it all over the bottom and then really tap it into the corners by doing this on the side. And I actually do it over a trash can so that any flour that falls out is just going to go right into the trash. When you do it in the sink, the flour tends to make a kind of glue, sticky glue with the water, and then it's hard to scrub off the sink too. So you'll just make sure that you prep the pan really well. The next piece is to look at what kind of mixer you have. So we have this nice KitchenAid mixer, stand mixer at home. We're going to use the paddle attachment for this. You also can use just a hand mixer with the little attachments that go on it. And I don't have one of those to demonstrate. You can also just use a bowl. If you have a Swedish dough mixer, that works well. A whisk will work for a little while, but then you're going to need a nice big strong wooden spoon or a big spoon to be able to navigate this. It's a really heavy duty batter for this cake. The other thing I would recommend doing is just have all your ingredients prepped. So you're fortunate if you have the kit because all of your ingredients were measured out and labeled, so you have all that at your disposal. You'll need the cup of flour, a cup of sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder. Make sure it's baking powder and not baking soda. A healthy pinch of salt. You'll need some lemons or lemon juice, 2 eggs, and 8 tablespoons of butter or half a stick. It's best if actually it has to be softened to be able to mix in with the sugar. I'd also recommend mixing all the dry ingredients before you get started. So we're going to do that right now. I have a sifter. You can also use any kind of strainer that helps to break up any clumps, and it helps to distribute all those ingredients together. So I'm just going to use my sifter, and all you'll do is put all the dry ingredients together. So we have the cup of flour, again, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a pinch of salt. You don't want to add the sugar yet. And then we can just sift this so it's nice and distributed. And then just push out the last bits. If you don't have a sifter at home or a strainer, you can use a whisk or a fork and just mix those ingredients up. You want them to be powdery and light if you can help it, or if you can make it that way. All right, now we're ready to make the torte. So you're first going to cream the butter. So this is a step that actually helps to melt the sugar a little bit. So I'm just going to put the butter and that sugar into the mixer. You can use a regular bowl if you have a hand mixer, if you are going to use a spoon for that. I did forget to tell you in preparation, you do want to remove 2 tablespoons of the sugar that's in your container. And we're going to use that for part of the topping on the torte. So again, take 2 tablespoons of the sugar out of your container. And then I'm going to put the rest of this in with the butter. Make sure you lock your mixer, and I'm going to turn it on for a minute so it'll be loud. So what you're looking for here is to make a nice fluffy mixture. Again, the sugar kind of melts into the butter a little bit and it helps to distribute that. So when you bake it, the sugar can really melt in and bind with the butter and connect with the flour, and it makes that crumb of the cake. And the baking powder and eggs are going to help it to rise and give you that nice fluffy cake. So I've actually done this where I've left this mixing for like 10 minutes and it's so lovely when it's done, but you don't have to do that. You just really want it to be nicely incorporated together. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So again, the longer you do it, the more fluffy it will get, but this is a good amount for now. Now we're going to add each egg. And one little trick that I learned, when you put the eggs in, it's oftentimes better to have them at room temperature. And then also when you add each egg, add just a little bit of flour and it prevents any curdling from happening. So I feel comfortable cracking the eggs right on the bowl. But if you don't feel good about your egg cracking capabilities, you can do that over a separate bowl and just make sure you don't have any shells or anything that goes into it. I worked in a commercial kitchen recently and I've never seen anything like it. It was amazing. One of the chefs just sat there and crack, 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 crack. She must have cracked 100 eggs in like 4 minutes. It was nuts. So this particular recipe doesn't require you to put one egg in, mix it, one egg in, mix it. You can just dump them all in there together. But you do want this nice and mixed up so everything is really distributed. You'll also notice that this cake doesn't require any vanilla or traditional flavorings that we use in this country. Again, this is a European recipe. So one thing that you do want to do is scrape down the bowl. So you can use a spoon or a spatula to do this. One trick I've done is just use the paddle attachment and just use that to scrape down the bowl. It saves you from having to wash another spoon or from having your husband having to wash another spoon. Then you want to mix it up again. Sometimes the butter can get stuck on the paddle attachment or on the sides of the bowl at the top. So again, you really want all of that mixed up nicely. All right. Now we're going to add our dry ingredients. So you have the flour that you already mixed up, and you can just pour that into the mixer bowl. So this, if you don't have a mixer that can go on very low speed, it will poof flour all over your kitchen. So you can take off the paddle attachment and mix it up, use a spoon, use a spatula. This one looks like it goes slow enough, but I'm not gonna risk that. So I'm just gonna use the paddle attachment and wet my flour so it doesn't blow all over the place. And then I'm going to turn it on. So you don't want to mix this very long. You want there to be some heterogeneity of flour and butter and things like that. That does help to give a better crumb to this particular cake. Because it's dense, you want to have that. So any kind of muffin or a torte, things like that, you don't want to mix it too much. You just want to mix it until the dry ingredients are incorporated. That means that you don't have big clods of dry stuff. It means that everything's wet, but you're not going to want to mix it for very long. Something that's a lighter cake, you want to mix it for a really long time to get air in there so it gets fluffy from the air. All right, that's it. Now, let me grab a spoon. I'm going to scrape all of the batter off of the spatula or the paddle with the spatula. And then we're going to put it in the pan. And then we're going to have the lovely plums. All right. So you'll notice that this cake batter is very thick. So you'll really have to scrape it out of the bowl. And it will just plop right down into the pan. All right. So this is not going to cook very well. You want to distribute this batter all across the pan, and it's sticky and thick, and you've got that parchment in there, and it's just going to move all over the place. So I start off going like this and just moving it, you know, with my spatula, just a little bit at a time until it goes all over the pan. And these are just my personal habits here. You know, you can do whatever works for you to distribute that. Sometimes people put gloves on and spray their hands with spray or butter, stick their hands in flour. Any of that stuff is going to work. But once you get it out, then you can kind of spread it out. This cake really holds whatever you do on the top. It doesn't really melt into itself much, so you can't really hide any big waves of batter. All right, so that looks okay. Now we're ready to add the plums. So we are fortunate that these plums are already pitted and halved. So all you have to do is take the plums and put them on the cake. But if you don't have the benefit of having plums that are pitted, there are a bunch of different ways that you can do that. These were frozen, so they're super mushy, but I would just pop the pit out of these. And these are so little that I would probably just use a whole plum. You can take the pit out and then just put this on your cake too. So for this torte, you want the skin side up. And all you're gonna do is put these halves of the plum on the cake and push them down just a little bit. You want them to be nestled in the batter on the very tip, the very edge of the cut, but you don't want them to be sunken down into the batter. Part of the beauty of this cake is that those plums sink down themselves and it makes this gooey, chewy plum layer in the middle, but you don't have to do anything special to make that plum layer. So just push these plums down in there. So I'll show you how that looks. I find that leaving a little bit of batter between the plum halves is the best part, or works the best. So that gives it a little bit of cake between the plums. And you can put as few or as many as you want. We've got plenty of plums here in your kit to work with. And put them in some kind of decorative pattern. It doesn't really matter because you won't really see them when you get the cake out of the oven. So this is what I'm going to do. All right. So now there's a little bit of magic here. We are going to sprinkle lemon juice, cinnamon, and sugar all over the top of this torte. And I've cut a lemon here. There are all kinds of, you know, tricks for getting the most juice possible out of a lemon. You can roll it on the tabletop before you cut it. You can put it in the microwave for like 3 seconds, freeze it for a little bit of time. There are a bunch of different hacks there, but we're just going to use the lemon because we just need a couple teaspoons. So make sure you use some kind of strainer, something like that, so you get the seeds out, and then just squeeze the lemon over the torte. Try to coat the plums with a light lemon coating. You don't want too much standing lemon juice, but it's okay if it has a little bit. And take your sugar. And this is the 2 tablespoons that I saved at the beginning. And sprinkle that evenly over the torte. Whoops. And definitely make sure you get the edges. The nice part about this is the sugar makes this crunchy top, So this is one of my more popular torts for my bakery. It has lots of different textures and flavors in it, sweet and kind of just bready. And then you've got the tart plums and the sweet plums. And yeah, it's wonderful. And actually, I think I'm not going to put the whole 2 tablespoons. Never mind. I'll do that. I am a cook that's a little bit like, oh, let's do this. So I follow recipes, of course. So now we're going to take the cinnamon and we're just going to sprinkle it. I brought a couple of other things too. Apple pie spice goes really well on this, just to give it a little bit of different flavor. I have a cinnamon sugar mixture that I sometimes use. It's got a couple different cinnamon types. And this is a bizcochito spice. It's got some star anise and vanilla and mace in it too. So you can use different seasonings if you want to make this a little bit different. I don't put too much cinnamon on here, but I just put a sprinkling. All right, there we go. All right, so now hopefully you heated up your oven. I forgot to tell you to turn on your oven. So you bake this for, no, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, 25 minutes. What does it say? Oh, it says 45 minutes. I usually make smaller ones at 350. So this cake is finished. I didn't put a toothpick in, but I can tell that it's done. And all you're going to do is flip it over, put your hand on the middle. So mine's not coming out very easily. So I'm going to take a butter knife and run it along the edges. And that should release it from the pan. I can see some yummy caramelized plum juice sugar goo on the side there that's holding it into the pan. Oh yeah, you should wait for about 10 minutes when it comes out of the oven. So I cheated and made this earlier today, so I would have a quick cake to just pull out for you. So yeah, you definitely want to wait till it's at least 10 minutes before you take it out. All right. So now I'm going to put my hand here and I'm going to just flip it over and it just comes right out. Then you can peel the parchment off and we'll use this as a cake plate. Here is your torte. And you'll notice that it's not very tall, but it's, probably double the size of the batter that you put in your cake plate. You'll also notice that you don't see any plums on the top, but if you look at the sides, you can see where they fell. So we're going to use a cake knife. And I would recommend any kind of serrated knife. And we're just going to cut some slices. And you can see the lovely plums that are inside. So they've sunken down in there, and really that plum flesh and the butter and sugar make this really nice plum. It's not really pudding, but it's like a gooey, chewy layer. And then you've got the nice crunch of the sugar on the top. It makes a really crunchy top that's sweet. And then, yeah, nice torte. So I hope you enjoy it. You can substitute a lot of different fruits in this torte. You can also sprinkle it with powdered sugar. You can make a sauce out of your plum juice that's left over, add some sugar and just boil it for a little while and pour it over the top. You could put plum jam on it too. That would be good. All right, well, thank you for joining us.